My first presentation for this group is nutrition, and this is a topic that's near and dear to me. I have probably 12 hours of nutrition lectures, and every time I get to do one, I try to cram everything I can into that little time. So I'm not sure where we'll end up at the end of this, how much we'll get covered, but we'll do our best. So some of the things I really would like to share and discuss a little bit are the primary and secondary outcomes from the AREDS 2 study that originally, as you know, was published May of last year, and the follow-up papers are just now starting to trickle out. So we'll talk about what those results really were and what they mean to us. We're going to talk about genetics and macular degeneration because there's a great deal of controversy right now surrounding whether or not we should test our patients before supplementation. And then we're going to spend just a couple of minutes on Meso-zeaxanthin or Meso-zeaxanthin, depending upon your pronunciation preference, because that's another area of controversy right now. So the AREDS 2 study was a different design as nutrition studies go, because we're all accustomed to the experiments where we have a treatment group and a control group. And you give half the group a certain treatment and the other half you don't. And at the end of some time period, you look and see, what are the outcomes? Did the treatment work or did it not work? But the AREDS 2 groups were very complex. And this is also inherent in a lot of nutrition research in general, because we can't separate out, like we can with a pharmaceutical study, what nutrients patients are getting. So if I'm going to do a drug study and I want to give you people drug A and you people drug B and you people nothing, you're not going to go and get drug A in your spinach or in your smoothie. That smoothie is delicious, by the way. That pink drink is really good if you haven't had that yet. But I don't know you're not getting that drug in your food. But in nutrition, you're getting it every time you ingest some food or drink. You're getting something. So it's very difficult to begin with. So I want to just preface all of the research by saying that, because we can't really apply the same rules of reasonableness, the same hard science rules to nutrition as we do to other more traditional scientific research. But the goal of it was to see whether or not adding 10 milligrams of lutein and 2 milligrams of zeaxanthin and 1,000 milligrams total of omega-3 fatty acids had any additional protective benefit in preventing vision loss, stage 4 macular degeneration. And so this was the study protocol, and it's already quite complex. So they had over 4,000 people, and they had a so-called control group. We'll talk about those in just a minute. So part of these people got lutein and zeaxanthin, part of them got DHA and EPA, the omega-3s, and part of them got both of the new ingredients. But this control group actually wasn't really a control group, because only 19 people out of this whole 4,000 ended up not getting a drug, okay? Other people got some version of the original AREDS formulation. So it was either the original one, or they took out the beta-carotene, they reduced the zinc, or they did both. Now that's super complex. So you can have all new stuff and all new formulation, kind of revamped AREDS 1, or you might actually just be taking the original AREDS and nothing new. So there are about 16 different subgroups that ended up being compared, which makes it highly unusual in complexity. The other thing that made this study just a little bit different is that they weren't just looking to see, is this working or is this not working? They wanted to see, is it better than AREDS? Because AREDS already had a fantastic profile, 25% reduction in risk from stage 3 to stage 4. That's crazy. It's the first time we ever saw anything like that in nutrition with an age-related eye disease. They wanted another 25%, a very high bar to set in order to reach statistical significance. And they set that at the beginning of the experiment, as is common practice, to say, we're not going to say that it worked until we hit that 25% statistical significance. So this was the original AREDS. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. This was 2001 when this paper first came out. But very high doses of vitamin C and E, huge dose of zinc, and a fairly large dose of beta-carotene. The copper is just in there to prevent anemia from taking such a big gob of zinc every day. And just to give you kind of a reference point, in the US, we have our reference dietary intake levels now. Just to show you how large these quantities were in each category, this was a little bit unusual to study such huge doses of vitamins. A lot of people kind of criticized this from the beginning. Of course, now we know it was quite effective. And as I mentioned, the control group, they were taking a version of the original AREDS supplement. Now, a couple of other things. When we start to look at improvements, try to look at, here's one group, and we're going to now compare this other group of people to them. The original AREDS people and the AREDS 2 people were different. They looked different. One thing was that they were a little bit older. More people were taking statin drugs. Far more people, about 40% of the group was taking statin drugs, which is important, and I'll tell you why in a few minutes. There were a lot of diabetics, far more than in the general US population. So that matters. When you're talking about vascular disease and blood vessel damage, delivering nutrients to someone's eye, these things matter. They were a little bit older, as I mentioned. Many of them, almost all of them, were taking Centrum Silver, which I know is available here as well. I think it's got the #1 market share internationally, Centrum Silver, in terms of a daily multi. And it contains about 11 milligrams of zinc by itself. So they're getting gobs and gobs and gobs of zinc. And then the other important thing to remember is that, at least in the US, and I think the trend is the same over here, older people tend to be better nourished with respect to fruits and vegetables than younger people. And a lot of different surveys have borne this out, that giving ourselves a grade on our food intake, kids are in really low levels. It's hard to get kids to eat kale chips. But older people, as we get older, we get so much smarter, don't we? And we know that eating our vegetables is so much better for us. But this group of people was better nourished even than other age-matched people, okay, in terms of how many servings of, dark leafy greens and so forth. So that made them a little bit different. So this was May 5th of last year, and it was a Sunday that these came out, and I know that because I am a big nerd, and I was very anxious about these results coming out. We've been waiting and waiting. I actually had somebody attend the press conference. No, I didn't have them. They were there, and they were texting me as they were delivering these results. That's the kind of nerd that I am. So this paper came out in JAMA, and then simultaneously in JAMA Ophthalmology. The two first reports were aggregate data of all 4,203 people comparing, did this new formula work to prevent AMD or cataract? And that was the first thing that came out. We were all at the edge of our seat waiting because we were just so sure we were going to get fantastic results. And their conclusions were that the addition of these ingredients had no overall effect on the risk of developing advanced AMD. A lot of people just kind of threw their pen down and walked away from the table at that point and said, well, that was a whole lot of nothing, big goose egg. And they didn't really stop to read the paper. I had to read the paper about literally 10 times before I really understood what it was that they were saying. They did conclude that lutein and zeaxanthin are an acceptable carotenoid substitute for beta-carotene in an AMD supplement. And I think that's the world's biggest understatement in nutrition research. They found no significant additional benefit with the 1,000 milligrams of EPA-DHA. One thing I would like to bring out is that they measured compliance by pill count, which means if you go in for your 6-month check during this study period, and they give you 6 months worth of supplements, when you go back in the next time, you're supposed to bring your bottles or your cards or whatever they gave you, and they count how many are left to see how good you were at taking your pills. Which I can tell you that is not necessarily a scientifically sound theory, because in order to stay in the study, you had to reach 75% pill compliance. And if you still want your free multivitamins, there's some incentive there to maybe kind of leave some of those at home before you go back for your appointment. And I know that that actually was a factor that they tried to take into account, but without doing serum analysis on every single patient before and after, there's no other way to determine if they were compliant. So that was a little bit of a drawback. Well, see, here's what happened after that May 5th paper came out, and they concluded, didn't really work. So we start getting all these things in our inboxes. Antioxidants and omega-3s fail to halt macular degeneration. And I'm sure you probably have the same, whatever service you may subscribe to, either voluntarily or involuntarily, things coming through your inbox about what the results were. And it was a tragedy, in my opinion, because it was as inaccurate as you could be to say that these things don't work. So what they found was that looking at all 4,203 people, there was an additional 9 to 10% an additional benefit over original AREDS. Well, that to me, even though it didn't reach their 25% statistical level, 9 to 10%, if your grandmother is the one in that 9 or 10 out of 100, it's significant to her. So first of all, the statistics, I think, put them at a disadvantage. However, if you took out the beta-carotene and instead put in the lutein and zeaxanthin, the additional benefit was about 18%. Now we're getting somewhere. I personally feel, as an aside, that there is no science that supports the use of beta-carotene in an eye supplement or any supplement. Most people aren't aware of the risk of beta-carotene with former or current smokers and lung cancer. Most people aren't. And periodically, I go to Target and CVS and other drugstores, and I just kind of read labels of the nutrition supplements that are available, just because I want to see what my patients are facing when they go out there. 9 out of 10 of them, the vitamin A is in the form of beta-carotene. And nowhere on the label does it say should be avoided in smokers or former smokers. Most people don't know that. So when you look at these data and you see, well, if we leave the beta-carotene in there and just add the lutein and zea, we get 9%, but if we take the beta-carotene out, we get much better. Well, that to me, that's a no-brainer. And the reason for it, the reason that that effect is different, is that there is some competition in the carotenoids and the absorption and the receptors, where they can be saturated. So take out the beta-carotene. And then here was the real benefit. They divided up those people. I told you they were better nourished than the average age-matched person. When they divided them up into 5 groups, about the best nourished to the least nourished, they found in that lowest group an additional 26% reduction in progression. Now that reached their statistical significance. Remember, we were looking for 25%. So in people that were the least nourished, taking in about 0.7 milligrams a day of lutein and zeaxanthin, that's like a tablespoon of spinach on average per day, there was a huge benefit additional with the lutein and zeaxanthin. So where does that come into context for our patients? Oh, and 32% for cataract. So 26 AMD, 32% cataract in that lowest group. Well, this is the typical American intake. This is the 10 plus 2 milligrams of lutein and zeaxanthin, this block back here. And this is the typical American intake. And as far as I can tell, using the resources online, we have pretty similar profiles. And so what this tells us is there is a huge nutritional gap for the vast majority of adults in this at-risk age group. Okay? So in the States, depending upon which paper you read, it's somewhere about 1, 1.2, 1.5, 1.7, somewhere in that range in terms of our average daily intake of these nutrients. So we've got a gap to fill. So my summary of this is that lutein and zeaxanthin were beneficial when added to or substituted for beta-carotene, particularly in that group that is more similar to the average daily. We call it the Standard American Diet, or SAD, and it doesn't spell sad for nothing because it's pitiful. So comparing the data of that lowest group is more beneficial, more accurate than comparing across the entire group in terms of the findings. Mentioned about lung cancer. This study again found that people with smoking currently or former smoking had a greater chance of lung cancer in taking the beta-carotene supplement. Current smokers weren't even allowed to take the beta-carotene version. They weren't even put into that group because they already knew. But former smokers, again, what does a former smoker mean? Nobody really knows. Is it 6 months ago? Is it 20 years ago? Did you smoke one cigarette at a party in high school? Were you a 3-pack a smoker up until 5 years ago? There's really no single definition. In my opinion, we don't even need the definition because there's no benefit to outweigh any potential risk with beta-carotene because it's an inferior supplement to begin with. Also, they had originally, remember, there was 80 milligrams of zinc in the original AREDS. They tested that again and they compared it to 25 milligrams of zinc because 80 milligrams of zinc is a lot of zinc. And there's some thought that maybe we're over-mineralizing ourselves, particularly as we get older. So it had no difference. There was no difference at all in those two doses. So they left it at 80. We were all just kind of doing that too, scratching our heads saying, I'm not sure exactly why they did that, but they did. So this is the official formula now. So if you look at any product and it says it has the logo and it says AREDS 2, it needs to contain these levels. So 10 of lutein, 2 of zea, 400 vitamin E, 500 C, the 80 of zinc, and of course the 2 copper. Now, a couple of things about this formula, and this is, I think, probably the more important part. If you're going to make a recommendation to patients, if you're going to, I don't know if you sell it in your office or if you tear off coupons and tell people to go online, the vitamin E, and I think we may have a few slides about particularly vitamin E. Vitamin E they're not all created equal. And that's even more true for the lutein source. We have some companies advertising 100 milligrams of lutein in one pill or 40 milligrams. You can go on Amazon.com and look and just put in lutein and see the vast array of prices and doses. Here's the thing you want to look for. You want to look for the FloraGlow brand because the FloraGlow lutein is the one that was used in this study. It's also been used in 66 other publications. And it's the source of the lutein that matters. And the reason that the FloraGlow is what you want is that it's a stable molecule. And they subject themselves to all types of external review and certifications and inspections. Other lutein that's not in a stable form will isomerize. In other words, it'll change chemical configuration in the bottle, particularly under conditions of high heat. And we don't know where these things are stored before they end up on the shelves. Many times they're in a warehouse, they're on the back of a truck for who knows how long. And when it starts off as lutein, maybe it starts off at 40 or 50, but it will very quickly disintegrate into a non-usable form. So then when they test it, and you've probably seen, I don't know if you saw last week, there were reports of, I think it was the CVS brand of, I can't remember what their proprietary name is. It was supposed to have 20 or 40 milligrams of lutein in it, and they tested, and not one of the samples had more than 1 milligram of lutein in it. And this isn't unusual. This wasn't a surprise at all to me. I got people Facebooking me about it and saying, what's going on with this? And I'm like, this is not a surprise. It's an unstable molecule. So you want to look for, and they will advertise, there's several different brands that have that FloraGlow certification, and it'll be on the box. You won't have any trouble finding it. And the reason they advertise it is because it's expensive. It's more expensive for them to put that in their pill. and they don't want to lose that benefit. So that's probably the most important thing I can tell you about choosing a supplement, is to make sure you're getting the ingredient that was studied. So I mentioned we were going to talk about vitamin E. There's a whole bunch of different forms of vitamin E. There's 8 known. When we measure, if you were to go and get your vitamin E level checked at the doctor, they're going to measure the alpha tocopherol level. That's the one that's most plentiful. It's the only one we can really measure in a practical manner. The others may or may not turn out to be more important as we learn more down the road, but for right now, we're talking about alpha tocopherol. So here's part of the problem. When we start looking at studies and trying to compare, does this work? Is it harmful? Is it even worth the money? One of the things to look for in these multis is it natural or is it synthetic vitamin E? And here's how you tell. One says D-alpha tocopherol, and the other one says DL-alpha tocopherol. So kind of an unfair trick. How I remember it is that the synthetic has the L, and L is for loser. We don't want that, okay? I'll show you why in a minute. But synthetic vitamin E is not the same as natural vitamin E. The dosing equivalencies are different. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I don't know how much vitamin E you people had yesterday versus what you had. Did you eat almonds in your snack pack and did you avoid them? I don't know what you got. I don't even know what you got if you say you take a vitamin or a multi that has 100 IUs of vitamin E. I don't know what that is because I don't know what form it is. Look at these equivalencies. So if you take 1 milligram, you can either get it in milligrams or IUs. The amounts are different. So we can't even compare vitamin E research. And that's caused big problems when we start to look at is vitamin E harmful or helpful? Vitamin E is very controversial. You probably heard about the SELECT study where they found an increased risk of prostate cancer, 17% increased risk of prostate cancer in men taking 400 IUs of vitamin E. Well, that's scary. So AREDS and AREDS 2 say you should take it, the 400 milligrams, because it helps prevent macular degeneration. And then SELECT says, not if you're a guy, unless you really want prostate cancer. So now what are you supposed to do as a patient or even as a physician? What do you recommend to your patients? Well, wonder why AREDS 2 didn't find any additional risk in prostate cancer. They used a naturally sourced vitamin E at 400 IUs. Do you know what SELECT used? A synthetically sourced vitamin E. Same thing with the increased risk of cardiovascular disease. There were several, the Women's Health Study and then the HOPE study found an increased risk of cardiovascular disease with vitamin E. Who would have thought that? The whole reason we started investigating vitamin E is because it was dissolving those plaques in atherosclerosis. It was preventing heart disease. What do you mean it causes heart disease? Increases the risk. Look at the form before you can interpret that data. And it's not easy because the other way that they talk about is all RAC alpha tocopherol. So there's 2 different names of supplements that are potentially not what you think they are. Last Monday or Tuesday, there was a cataract and vitamin E paper. Did anyone see that yet? I've been traveling like a crazy person, so I get whatever comes in my inbox is what I've read. I haven't actually gone and looked at real literature in a while. But there was a increased risk of cataract, supposedly. They used all RAC alpha tocopherol. So we have to look at all of this stuff in context. So the bottom line, and the question that I get is just stop with the science and the statistics. That bores me to death. I want to know, what do I tell my patient? I have a 55-year-old white female smoker who's got a BMI of 35. Her mother is blind in both eyes from dry AMD. And she wants to know what supplement to take. I want to know what to tell her. Just tell me the answer. I don't know your patient. So one thing that we have to, I think, move away from is the one-size-fits-all nutrition philosophy. That's where we've been. If you handed out the little blue sample of eye caps to everybody that was over the age of 50 in your practice, that's what we were doing 10 years ago. We've got to move on from that. We need to get to the point of being prescriptive and targeting the patients. So what do? Well, I have in my office the ability to order an intracellular analysis of what nutritional status my patients have. It's $279 US for them to get that test. If they're Medicare, it's free, which is really cool. But a lot of them aren't Medicare. A lot of them don't choose to go that route. They'd like, you know what, I don't have $279. I still want to know what vitamin to take. So there's at that extreme end. The other end is to say, yesterday, how many dark leafy green vegetable servings did you have? Most of the time I get this, well, yesterday was, very embarrassed. They're ashamed of what they ate or didn't eat. Everybody knows they're supposed to eat dark leafy greens and brightly colored fruits and vegetables. I'm not a genius to tell them that. They all know it. But then when I say, last week, how many servings of healthy prepared salmon or sardines or mackerel did you have? And they're like, I don't love salmon. Or I get, I'm trying to lose weight. And salmon has more calories than the other fish. So I eat a lot of fish. But I choose tilapia or orange roughy or something else that's more light. Tilapia, you might as well eat the cheeseburger, because it's got more omega-6 in it than it has omega-3. It truly does. That's the cheapest one on the state side, the cheapest fish. The other fish that are low fat, guess what? They're low omega-3. So they're not giving that benefit either. So I ask, yesterday, how many leafy green vegetables did you eat? Last week, how many servings of healthy, prepared, fatty fish did you eat? And from those two questions, and their reaction, I can basically tell what their probable status is. Are they out there with the SAD, standard American diet, or are they on the upper end? Okay, so I get an either or from that. And based on that, and based on family history, I recommend either full bore AREDS 2 supplement, or I tell them they either like an omega-3 by itself or maybe just the lutein zeaxanthin stuff by itself. So that's how I kind of come up with my recommendations. So how do we come up with which product you want to use? Most important is to choose a company that, I don't know what the availability, if you have Zeavision over here, if you have MaxiVision, if you have the B&L products, I'm not sure what you have available to you, but research what you have available and choose a company that has a reputation for applying the science to their product. Do they have a scientific advisory board with names on it that you recognize and trust? Do they have certification from third-party credentials that come in and inspect their facility to make sure that they have the exact, amounts in their products that they say they do? I have some of my patients on 20 milligrams of lutein and 4 milligrams of zeaxanthin a day. That's my 55-year-old overweight smoking white female with a family history. Because you know what? She's inflamed and she's at risk, especially if she's a white female with very light-colored eyes. Okay? I go higher on those doses with people who have higher adiposity. And the reason is that the carotenoids, lutein and zeaxanthin, are stored in fat. So they're going to retain more of it in their tissue, which means less of it is available to them at their macula. The other thing to consider, and this isn't on the slide, but if you have a patient taking a statin or has low HDL, the statin's going to artificially depress the HDL. Somebody who has low HDL, high LDL to begin with, those people need a higher dose of lutein and zeaxanthin because those two carotenoids are carried on the HDL molecule. A lot of the other nutrients are carried on the LDL molecule, which is why you need some LDL. But lutein and zeaxanthin are unique in that they are carried on HDL. So if you are taking a statin and you have high body adiposity, I don't care if you eat 6 spinach salads a day, you're not getting the same amount of lutein and zeaxanthin as is a younger, leaner male without smoking and without cholesterol issues that has high HDL. That person doesn't need as much. Maybe they don't need any. Okay, so there are people that simply don't need to supplement. Their diets are fine, they're on point, they're not storing it in weird spots that doesn't help, okay? Not everybody needs the supplement. So again, we have to apply, some art and not just the science. Okay, so let's talk about some of these carotenoids I've been alluding to. Lycopene is a very popular carotenoid. Everyone thinks that this tomato ketchup is a wonderful source of carotenoids. In fact, it's our number one source in America, the number one source of carotenoids in our diet. And to go along with that, guess what our number one vegetable source is? The French fries that go with the ketchup. No joke. That's a sad state. But lutein is as plentiful in our serum, and zeaxanthin not quite so much, but you can see that ratio of about 20-3, 20-4. That's kind of where they come up with the ratio of what to put in supplements. As I mentioned, it's an inadequate intake in North American adults. That's mirrored pretty much throughout the world. Often these two nutrients are found together, and that's why we talk about them as combined intake instead of just separately. But if you're looking at comparing the sources of lutein and zeaxanthin in the diet, this one, everyone's eye goes immediately there. That's the goji berry. Is that a common thing over here? Goji berries, yes? Okay. Some people I have no idea. It's in the States, maybe 3 people out of 300 in a room will know what I'm talking about when I talk about a goji berry. Ours, we get them dried. Is that how you have them here? Okay, so you put them in their little sort of dried state. I tried that, and then it kind of felt like I was eating part of my belt because they're real chewy. So I soak mine overnight in water and then use them, and it plumps them back out so they look and feel more like a raisin. So that's, if you haven't tried them because they look weird, try that, because they're fantastically filled with zeaxanthin. It's the highest known food source of zeaxanthin that we know. And it's pretty, they're inexpensive. They have protein, they've got omega-3, they've got fiber, they've got more potassium than bananas and orange juice. They've got iron, so it's really a superfood. But some of these others you're familiar with. I know you can't read the writing here, so this is kale and spinach. These are cooked. That's another thing that surprises people. A lot of people think that the raw foods give you better access to the nutrients, and in fact, for the carotenoids, cooking them gives you better access. And if you cook it with fat after you've chopped it a little bit, that's going to really score you the best bang on your buck. So if you don't love spinach salad, but you don't mind, like even the spinach smoothie, the green smoothie, if you blend it up, you're going to get more because you have to break down the cell wall. That's why you have to cook it. And then having a little bit of fat will help it absorb because remember it's carried on a fat molecule. Okay. So spinach, kale, collards. This is a big thing in the southern U.S. Collard greens and turnip greens. I grew up on that stuff. Broccoli, corn is something that does have a little bit of zeaxanthin in it. But of the foods that are commonly available, not counting goji berry, the orange pepper is king. So the other take home, in addition to some of these other little nuggets, if you can make little changes in your diet or your patient's diet, switch from iceberg to romaine, or better, spinach, and switch from those green bell peppers to the orange ones. They're a little more money, but the green ones have absolutely no nutrition in them. They're crunchy water. But the red ones and the yellow ones and the orange ones are packed with other carotenoids. So that's my free nugget of nutrition for you is get off the green peppers. Cooked spinach versus raw spinach. These, you guys know what 100 grams of food is. I have to convert this for when I speak in the States. Because we get our spinach and it's organic girl or something in a bag. It's about this big. I don't know is that the same? So it's a little over half the bag. In a salad will still only net you 6.5 milligrams of lutein. That's a huge spinach salad. But if you cook it, you're going to be better off. Pumpkin is another kind of unknown source of this. You can put that in chili and soup and meatloaf and all kinds of weird things. Zeaxanthin, as we talked about, goji berries, highly variable but high. And orange peppers, again, this is the second biggest one. Remember, we're only looking for 2 per day of zeaxanthin in the diet. So a little bit of corn tortillas with some orange peppers, you're all set to go on Zea. Okay. So back to what should your patient take. I mentioned about a sort of casual question. What do you eat? There's other tests you can do. We have MPOD, macular pigment optical density. How many of you have that available in your office? Some of you do, a couple of you. That's a really good estimate of the carotenoids in a diet. It is, in my opinion, better than the transdermal test, which is the one that you kind of grab onto what looks like an old-fashioned joystick from an old game, an old Atari game. And it will measure, supposedly, how much carotenoid is in your system. That has a lot of variability, remember, about the fat storage. So if somebody's holding on and they're trying to measure through their skin, it's not going to be the same exact measurement as where we really need the lutein and Zea, which is in the macula. So the MPOD, I believe, is more accurate than the transdermal. You can do serum levels, and as I mentioned, you can do an intracellular. Okay. One other thing, if you're considering getting a macular pigment, an MPOD measurer in your office, and you're kind of on the fence about it, there's some new literature showing a correlation with cognitive processing in older adults, so that the higher the MPOD, the higher the cognitive processing, the faster speeds, crossword puzzles, reaction times, all types of things like this. So this is something I think that most people in that age group have a little, at least somewhat of a concern. You know, am I declining cognitively? I think people might even be more worried about that than losing vision. So it's another, I think, sort of whole wellness thing to consider. And they're not just looking at MPOD and cognitive processing, but there's a lot of other evidence looking at lutein zeaxanthin serum levels and cognitive processing. Why is this? Because lutein and zeaxanthin are unique in that they not only cross the blood-retina barrier so that we can get them there nicely pigmenting a robust macula, but they also cross the blood-brain barrier. And ultimately, what lutein and Zea are doing, besides darkening our maculas, which is more of a, filter effect, is that they're antioxidants. That's what they do. So if we can get good, powerful antioxidants to cross our blood-brain barrier and protect our, cells upstairs, well, that's all good. Okay. The only cautions that I have to share with you, I always, anybody taking Coumadin or warfarin, I don't touch those people. I have no interest in messing up their balance. In general, the supplements of lutein and Zea, you know that people on Coumadin and warfarin are supposed to avoid eating tons of leafy greens. There's a lot of stuff in those leafy greens that has nothing to do with lutein and Zea, and that's typically what's interacting. And the lutein and Zea are already in little tiny fat kind of envelopes as a supplement so that you don't need the fat in your diet to absorb it. So typically it's not going to be an issue with Coumadin people. However, not being a cardiologist or a hematologist, I don't want to mess with that. So I always give them a written recommendation and I say, please ask your cardiologist or whoever's monitoring you if this is okay for you. I do the same thing with pregnant women. I do the same thing with breastfeeding women. Those groups, even though lutein and zeaxanthin and the omega-3s are essential in pregnancy and breastfeeding, Many times women who are under the care of their obstetrician, they're already taking some sort of a supplement, a prenatal, and I don't want to overdose them on any one thing. So I don't touch them either. I give them a written recommendation, go check with your doctor. So we're going to spend just like 30 seconds on Meso-zeaxanthin. And this is a picture that was published several years ago, but it's a brilliant picture of the actual macula, the foveal pit. And this orangey yellow color is where the macula lutea gets its name, lutein. Okay, so it's a yellow pigment. It looks brown when we look in. And Meso-zeaxanthin is a controversial topic right now because some people, Ireland is the epicenter of the research in this particular substance. There's, I can't remember the name of the hospital. Somebody probably knows it. Which one? Okay. So they've published 12 papers maybe about Meso-zeaxanthin and its benefit in filling in the pigment here. Their data is very solid. And what they have found particularly, and this is brand new research, particularly that in smokers and women who have trouble filling in this tippy, tiny middle pit right here, that the Meso-zeaxanthin supplement actually works better in certain people than just lutein and zeaxanthin. So this is a controversy because there's only one supplement company that has the patent that can put this, the US patent that can put it in their supplement. And the other companies have just lutein and zeaxanthin. This graph shows the ratio of lutein and zeaxanthin in the general sort of macular area, and you can see how that really drops off here right in the tippy center because that pit is filled with Meso-zeaxanthin. From a chemical standpoint, if you've got lutein in your system, it will convert to Meso-zeaxanthin, and you're going to get that beautiful spike right there. The problem is that we believe is that some people don't convert as well, and that may make them more vulnerable to UV light because ultimately what this is doing is absorbing the UV light like black upholstery in your car instead of white. So if you can absorb the heat, it keeps those free radicals and the UV-induced damage from affecting all of the other macular tissues. So if you leave part of it unpigmented, that one little white spot on your car, that's going to be the cool spot, which is represented then with more light being reflected back out. That's what we want to avoid in our macula. So if you can't fill in this pit, you may have bigger trouble. In those patients, it may be advisable moving forward that Meso-zeaxanthin in a supplement is advisable. Right now, we don't know 100%. We just don't know. So that's still somewhat under controversy. This basically just showing how much research we have for lutein and zea, how much research we have for meso. It's building and building, but we just don't have as much as we used to or as much as we do for lutein and zeaxanthin. Right now, there's only one company making a supplement. I know you can't read these. This is called MacuHealth. They're the only ones that contain any Meso-zeaxanthin, at least of what's available in the States. And I think that I am out of time. I think that I got a little bit of a later start. So I don't have time to cover the omega-3s specifically, but I will answer any questions that you guys may have about that. Yes? Unfortunately, no. Omega-3s, there's a lot of different forms of them. The shortest one is called alpha-linolenic acid, ALA. And that's what's found in chia and flax and walnuts, the plant-based sources. In order for that to convert into EPA and DHA, which are much longer molecules, those are the ones we know are beneficial. It has to go through a lot of enzyme conversions, and a little molecule is added and a couple of carbons are added to get from ALA to EPA and DHA. And every time there's an enzyme conversion, you lose about 50%. So by the time you go from here to here, you're at about 5 to 10%. So it's not that you can't get EPA and DHA. It's that you have to take so much more on a gram for gram basis because you have to keep in mind that conversion isn't happening. When you think about the best sources are marine sourced basis, okay? If you don't eat fish or krill or anything that is an animal, like object, think about what those fish ate in order to get the omega-3 in their body so that we could enjoy it. They ate algae. So there are algal sources of DHA that are vegetarian certified. Astaxanthin. Yeah, which is fabulous. Astaxanthin is another carotenoid. It's what causes crabs and snapper and lobster to be red in color. It's a red carotenoid pigment. It is super beneficial in preventing UV damage. In fact, people are looking at it as a sunscreen, as an internal sunscreen. So if you're going to be traveling to my neck of the woods in South Florida and you have fair skin, at least 2 weeks in advance, you should start supplementing with astaxanthin, and it's been shown to be very protective. It's also an HDL raiser. So if you're taking a statin, that's one way you can up your HDL even while you're still taking the statin to lower your LDL. It is a really good antioxidant. It may help with H. pylori if you have gastric reflux disease and you want to get off your Nexium. Astaxanthin has been shown to clear the H. pylori in your system. I'm a huge fan of astaxanthin. I'm a huge fan of algal DHA, which is more expensive than even good quality fish oil. But if you're a vegetarian, that's the way to go, not the flax. Flax is really good for colon cleansing if you take the whole seeds. It's a very good flush, if you will. But don't be surprised if you have to take the amount of flaxseed oil in order to get to the EPA DHA levels, you don't want to leave home that day. Stay home.